Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you today?
Doing pretty well. How are
Uh,
you?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we are well. So may I ask you please to tell us your name?
Sure. My name is Jessica Ruiz.
Yes. And will you share a little bit about yourself, something that you feel comfortable sharing?
Sure. Um, One of my biggest accomplishments is achieving my doctorate degree in education leadership. And I served as a faculty member at City Colleges of Chicago. And now I have found myself in ed technology. So that's pretty new for me, helping universities build out their online programs.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, most importantly, I'm proud of my educational background, I think.
Yes. I think it's very interesting that for Black and Brown women, absolutely achieving this doctorate degree or some form of higher education is always not not always seen as an accomplishment, but it really is because um, I did my doctorate degree in 4 years from start to finish to
Wow.
finish my dissertation, and I will tell you that was the hardest thing I had ever done.
Hmm.
And even to this day, people don't acknowledge that accomplishment for me, and it's really hard because I have to remind people that my name is Dr. Rochelle Newton, not
Yes.
just Rochelle or
Right.
Miss Newton, but actually doctor. I've achieved this accomplishment, and I don't want it to be minimized. You encounter that?
I do. So as I mentioned, I just joined Ed Technology, and it's a new company, so they wanted to introduce me. And in my email setting, it says Dr. Jessica Ruiz. But I notice many do have their masters and their PhDs. And before announcing me to the entire company, HR reached out and said, "Do you prefer that we use doctor?" And I actually said, "Well, what's the culture here? I'm unsure." Landed up not using doctor to address me because I wanted to fit in. But
Mhm.
I thought, well, I mean, do I really fit in? A lot of my colleagues might not have the same challenges or the same obstacles to attain their doctoral degree. And so that's why it's not important to be addressed as doctor. Whereas for me, this was a dream, I think, for 3 generations at least prior to me to attain a terminal degree. And yeah, so I kind of internally, I kind of struggled with that. I want to fit in. I don't want others to think I'm trying to rise above them. But at the same time, I don't think our lived experiences were the same. So maybe I should constantly, no matter what the setting or environment is, constantly remind others I am Dr. Jessica Ruiz, even if they also have a PhD. Yeah, I sort of struggled with that.
You're absolutely right. And I'll tell you my example of that. So when Mr. Floyd was killed back in March, it was amazing the number of people who called him George, like they knew him. And typically when you're on a first name basis with someone, you have some kind of connection or you've given them permission, So like I tell a lot of people, you're welcome to call me Rochelle, but I want that first acknowledgement that I am Dr. Newton, and then I will say, whether you can call me Rochelle or not. But I was really amazed at the number of people that thought it was okay to call him George. And wow,
Interesting.
that's his birth name, and that's his name and all of that stuff. We didn't know him. We saw his lived experiences and then his death. So where did we get the right to assume that we had the right to call him by that name or anybody for that matter,
Yeah.
because I grew up in a time when you didn't do that. You always called people that were older than you or people you did not know, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, whatever their last name was, Miss, Mrs., whatever it is you knew, and not that. And I think when we, as people, Black and Brown people, we give people permission to call
Mm,
us whatever our name is without them knowing, it becomes natural for them and they can't go back. So you can't go
right.
back and become Dr. Ruiz. You're now Jessica and you're going to be Jessica going forward.
Mhm.
But I think initially you have to give that permission. So you say, yes, when you're introduced, Dr. Jessica Ruiz. And then, someone starts talking to you, says, Dr. Ruiz, X, Y, and Z, you can say, well, you can call me Jessica. But you need to give that permission versus
Mhm.
granting it unanimously, just giving people permission to call you that. You need to take that and say less, because
Right.
think about how hard it was for you to get that degree. Think about all the
Right.
skin in the game, all the hours writing and rewriting and your research and all that you had to do. You didn't do that overnight. It took a long time to get there, and to give that away, I mean, you just said it. You said it at the start of this conversation. It's the accomplishment you're most proud of. I bet your family is proud of this. I bet they
Absolutely.
hold on to it, and they, so just don't give it away so easily. You're welcome to give it away, but let yourself be the person that gives others the permission to say, yes, you can call me Jessica.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think my mother would be applauding you right now if she were hearing this conversation, because she always says, you are Dr. Jessica Ruiz, and you have the right to tell people that.
Yep. I would even go a little further and just say you are Dr. Ruiz and give people, because I think some people make assumptions about what we can say to each other, right? So, when we started this, and I will admit my failure, I didn't know that you were Dr. Ruiz either, because I normally say Dr. whatever the person's name is, because I know how hard it was for me. And then the person that gives you permission to, call them by their first name, especially if you don't have a relationship or a dialogue with them previously, sort of like someone, taking something away from you or something. So you have to, assert that until you give it away.
Oh, wonderful. Yes, very good advice.
Absolutely. So why did you choose to get your doctorate in education? Did you have your master's, or did you do some undergraduate studies in education?
Yeah, sure. So I attained my Bachelor of Arts. My undergraduate studies were in psychology. I really enjoyed understanding people. And as you know, with the softer sciences or the humanities, you don't get hired right on with just the bachelor's. You need something.
Right.
And so I applied for a few programs. I was thinking about counseling, mental health, and actually, I found myself at the Erickson Institute in studying child development, which is a branch of psychology and really understanding the minds and the development of children. But really, one of the foremost factors of me doing my master's there was because they awarded me a 2-year full scholarship. And at that point, with student loans piling up from undergrad, I really didn't have a choice. And I think back to that, I am very appreciative of the 10 years I had in early childhood development, and I could apply it to any aspect of your life or your family's life. But now I find myself more of my niche, which is in higher ed, in education leadership. But it was a matter of, well, if someone's going to help me attain a master's degree and pay for tuition, then I'll just go that route. It really wasn't a choice at that point. So yes, I have my master's in child development from Erickson Institute. And then from there, I started working with early child care providers here in Chicago. And I would teach them about quality practices in home child care. For many Brown and Black communities, home child care is the first and foremost choice to provide services to children and family within the community. And this is preschool age, toddler age, infancy, because it's very, very expensive. There's some Montessori programs that are as costly as first year undergraduate tuition at a major university. And so when I was working with the child care providers throughout Chicago, I thought it was very interesting that they had years of experience. Many were neighbors or grandparents within the community, but they didn't attain a college degree, a 4-year degree, a master's degree. And so I was the one instructing them, teaching them. For my Spanish speaking providers, they would call me maestra, which means teacher in Spanish. And I thought, well, I'm only in my 20s. How am I her maestra?
Yeah.
But they really valued you. You attained this American dream. You have an education. You are my teacher.
Yeah.
And so that really got me thinking more about adult learning and the privileged and those who aren't as privileged as I am, those who English is their second language. And so that's how I found myself at Lewis University in a doctoral program in educational leadership, but the underpinnings were social justice, the critical race theory. So that really got me understanding the systems that are in place. So even if I worked with a child care provider who had 30 years of experience, their degree didn't align with American university standards. So they were just working as, I guess like a bit of lower wage jobs,
Right.
even if they attained a degree in their home country. And so I pushed that, and I wanted to question that. I want to understand it. And that's how I found myself in my doctoral studies in ed leadership.
Excellent. You and I have a lot of in common, other than the fact that I am very much older than you are. But I got one of my bachelor's degrees is in psychology, and I thought the same thing because I was always so I work in technology, information technology. So the pieces of what you see in front of you, technology, um, and what I was always shocked by was how people treated people of color in technology. So you could and we are underrepresented in leadership and in decision making in IT, not in participation, because there are IT people of all ethnicities throughout the structure of it, but use just that low wage, low pay, and so I wanted to know why people treated people like this. What was the purpose of that? And so I went to get my degree in psychology, and I also wanted to learn how to write better. Although my fingers belie me because my brain works faster than my fingers, so I leave out my word or two here. But I wanted to know that, and so when I got my degree, I thought I was going to be a psychiatrist. I wanted to be a PsyD. It was what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a PsyD. And one of the things I found is that it did not align with my work. So I was paid reasonably well for what I did. And when I looked at what a doctorate in psychiatry got you, it wasn't, comparable to what I was making already in my field. So I said, okay, well, I just want to go get this degree and understand, and then I'll go from there. And so when I got my doctorate is the same as yours, except for mine is not in social justice. Mine is in administration and leadership, so thinking, helping organizations lead and get past that. And so it never occurred to me to think about the money or why I was doing it. I just wanted that respect and acknowledgement that I had done this. And so I think what's really amazing about all of that is something you said is just so profound to me, that you have these people who've been doing this their whole lives. They have on the ground experience, right? They have been doing this for a long time. They understand the niches of this industry, and yet still, because they don't have that little piece of paper, they don't get paid equitably, right? And a lot of times that is Black and brown populations, Black and brown men and women, not just women, but just that. And so you go get the piece of paper, and then you have the conundrum that you just described. So do I want to fit in? Do I minimize myself? I've been minimized by others, but now I'm going to minimize myself because I feel so much better to not make these people feel uncomfortable. And yet, and still, no matter what you have, you find yourself in this rut. What is it that will make me succeed? And literally, I think in your case, since you're so young and beautiful also, but since you're so young, I think it's very important that you do, stick out your chest and boast a little bit, brag a little bit, because you have so much more to do. And, you're a very smart young woman. You've got so much going for you. So it's important that the world know you're out there and that you're coming, you're coming and you're going to bring change. So, whether you're doing it with your own communities, whether you're doing it in marginalized communities, it's very important that you get your voice out there so you can lead and speak to that community and make sure that they are receiving the recognition. So when when you start writing about this, when you start thinking about this in more of a public space, what is the area you want to focus on? And then what is the result of that? Because I will say one thing I've learned about my own career is that, I feel better when I'm doing something for somebody else than when I'm doing something for myself. So if you can understand who you're doing what you're doing for, it helps you, kind of align and feel good. Because if you're getting up every morning just doing it for a paycheck, after a while it's going to get old. But if you're doing it because you love it, if you're doing it because it makes you, get your juices going in the morning, you will find it is very valuable going forward. So I want to say, you should never minimize your experience or anybody else that you're working with, because what you bring is you bring your expertise to the table. And if you can lift somebody up while you're doing it, you're doing an amazing thing. Because I often tell people, if you don't give to the world doesn't give to you.
That's right.
Yep. So you have to find a way to give to the world. And however you do that, you have to. And I think in our cases, being a Black or brown person, there's so much need around us, right? So there's so many people who need what we bring, right? So if it's nothing more than positive affirmations, helping people understand how to navigate, how to see themselves, to be comfortable with themselves. There is that piece. So people need people like us. So it's important that you appreciate what you've gone through, your experiences, your education, and where you're going. But it's also important that you bring others along with you, because if you're going by yourself, you're going to find out you're very lonely when you get there.
Lonely. Right.
Yes.
Something I've become a bit more comfortable with too is, as you said, putting my chest out and really sharing my accomplishments, which I thought, don't brag, be humble. But then if I don't share my narrative, how will I inspire others? And so
Exactly.
that's what I've really been trying to work on these past few months. I've been trying to be more a bit active on my social media networks, on my professional networks. So not to say like, look at me, everyone, raise a glass to me, but more of, look at where I've come. Look at how far I've come. And what could I do to help you if that's where you want to go?
Absolutely. But I also think you need to write, right? So I think it would be, you don't have to write a book, or you don't have to write a dissertation, but I think it would be very helpful to write, short, maybe 5 pages or something like that about some experience. So what you did when you worked in early childhood education. So to write about that and where you see that market going, or to provide expertise to others. And I think what that does is it gets you noticed, and it gets people to see you're just more than this thing right here, right? Because typically when you get this degree and you're this thing, people just automatically assume that you are moving in a way that's not in step with where they are, so they can easily put you in this little box. But if
Mm,
you see and you tell people about what you're doing, first one, you're adding to your craft. And I know you said you're in ed tech now, but you're adding to your craft. If you're also doing that, you never know who you're going to inspire, right? You never know who's going to see what you wrote, or parents or whoever it is may see it and read it and say, hey, this is very valuable information. Because I think a lot of time, especially in Black and brown communities, we live on what other people feed us. We have our views. We learn so much by what's told to us about who we are, when that's really not accurate. It's really not accurate. So, I think it's very important for them to have literature and resources where they can go and say, oh, okay, well, I know this
right.
now because it's coming from somebody that looks like me, someone who's had my experiences, whatever. So you know that. So
Thank you for that advice. I
yeah.
will. I will do
Yep,
that.
absolutely. And like I said, you can decide, you may wake up one day and want to write a book, but you need to get your writing feet wet, so that you're writing about things that matter to you. Even if you
Mhm.
just wrote about getting your degree, like, when I woke up and I said I was going to do this, this is where I thought I was going, but I ended up here. And that tells people, you're be free to change your mind. You don't have to hold on to this thing so tightly as this, because never know. You may wake up and find that you were heading down this path and you want
Right.
to go down that path. And so it needs to be okay to do that, because a lot of people get stuck because someone told them this
Right.
is the path you should go, and it may not be the thing that's for you.
Right. Or it may not be just one path, you
Right.
know.
That's exactly right. Right. So that's why it's important. So let me ask you this. So why did you pick, so going from childhood education, because even with your doctorate degree, you could still work in that space. So what made you decide to go to the ed tech or technology side of the house, education technology?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you asked me. So I was finishing my dissertation chapters, and once I defended, I started as an adjunct in the education department with City
Mhm.
Colleges of Chicago, and I liked it. I loved it. I was hired full time, and I worked for 2 years full time, about 5 courses per semester. And one summer, I went to run an errand, and I ran into a previous student, and I asked, "Are you enrolled this semester? I haven't seen you in our department." And she said, "Well, no, because the classes don't align with my schedule, and
Mhm.
I cannot." And this is a brown woman, and she said, "I cannot go to school without money to pay for tuition, but I
Mhm.
need to work to get the money to pay for tuition." So I thought about that. Why is it that courses are only offered at certain days of the week, certain times of the year, based on the instructor's schedule, or it's really the power and role of the university. When I had asked, I believe it was my dean, I asked, and this was in fall of 2019. I said, when can we offer more online courses, hybrid? When this is what working class students are looking for. They need a bit more flexibility. They can't just be a full-time student, especially at the community college level. And the dean said, well, that's going to be a major lift. That's going to take some time. We need instructors to have professional development training. A lot of instructors don't see the benefit of putting their courses online or even moving into hybrid. They have to learn the learning management system. We're just not there yet. And lo and behold, later that year, as you know, in the spring of 2020, when the pandemic hit, universities couldn't continue running the way they were. We couldn't be in large groups in the classroom. We couldn't be on campus or in a cafeteria. Professors had no other choice. And I remember students, we had already launched our course, hybrid, so we were prepared. But I remember students said, I haven't heard from my biology teacher. It's been 3 weeks. I haven't gotten my grade from my English teacher. I don't think she knows how to use a grade book online. So I really saw this shift and this need in higher ed, not only for the students' benefit, but if universities want to move with the times, if they want to increase their enrollment, if they want to keep their doors open, this has changed whether we're ready or not. And so in higher tech, in ed technology, I now am able to support faculty, tenured faculty, adjuncts in building more of a dynamic approach to online learning. That's not just uploading your syllabus and putting an assignment, but being as interactive and as supportive as you can to students and making learning accessible to a diverse group of students that maybe, were questioning, is higher ed for me? I need to work. Does this work for my schedule? It's just, in my opinion, it's where higher ed is moving.
Yeah. I think everything is moving that way. I wrote something the other day on LinkedIn, will we return back to brick and mortar spaces the way we were pre-COVID? And I think not. I think we will go back in some hybrid form. I don't think we'll ever go back to just totally brick and mortar, because not only does it matter that we are reaching communities who may not be the brightest idea to bring them back to our spaces, but also I think that there's a part of this where we're reducing our carbon footprint. We're reducing the amount of money companies have to spend to house employees. People have to drive to work, car insurance, all of these things. There are really ways that we can do a lot to save money here. But I want to say what's on the other side of that, though, is really, profound to me. So if you work in a space where a great deal of the faculty have been there for a long time, so they're tenured track, they've been in the space for a long time, they're resistant to learning these new technologies. So in Zoom and however we were doing these classes, there were a lot of people that were resistant. And so specifically for Black and Brown faculty, tenured track people who've been there for a while, the resistance to change is high, because this is what I know. And I think that's also true for white faculty as well. But I mean, I think it's just more so because you probably grew up with technology your whole life. You probably had an iPhone, an iPad, you had technology very early on. If you're like me, well, I think I'm an exception, but for a lot of these Black women, we didn't grow up with technologies in our hand, especially if you were my age, right? So we grew up with pencil and paper and, someone standing in front of you lecturing. And there's a really good article that came out of Penn State that said the smartest person in the room is the person standing in front of it. It's never the people that's sitting in the chairs, because you regurgitate that information over and over and over again. You get it, so it becomes second nature to you. Whereas the person that's in the class is only there for a short period of time, and he or she may not retain everything that's said, but that person who's doing the instructing has done this over and over again, so they become brilliant at it, right? So, but more importantly, I think that a lot of the people that are teaching and instructing these days, there's a lot of resistance. So if you were to do a survey or a study right now, you'd find that the number of lecturers and instructors and professors over the age of 50 and were in a position to retired, because they didn't want to be laden with having to learn technology, having to understand all the things that go wrong. Because when you're in the building, you can go find your tech person and say, hey, I'm having a problem X, Y, and Z. But when you're at home and you're having a problem with your internet provider, you're having a problem with whatever, you go on a queue and you have to wait. So, there's a resistance to that. So I think that it is one of those things where, I wonder, while this is such a great idea, how do we get everybody up to speed so they are ready to, use the technology? And this is even true for the students. So even those digital natives, as you're often referred to, everybody thinks they understand technology, but what they do is they understand social media, they understand their phones, their computers, and all that stuff. But you know, tell them they got a virus. You know, tell them that they need to upgrade their OS, or downgrade the. You know, you thrown a kink in the process. So I think it's also something has to be considered. How do we educate those that are not necessarily in the same space as you are, and how do you envision that? What are your thoughts about how do you address that for people who need a little more help and an understanding of what this means working remotely?
Well, see, and I often think about that because at the community college, I served many students who were returning to the classroom after 30 years.
Mhm.
And some students shared, the last time I submitted a paper was on a typewriter.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I think about because they could really do with that. They'll do well with the in-person support of, yes, you can do it. And here's what I mean by click the escape button to get you out of this window.
Yep.
I also think about accessibility to these technologies. So when I did have in-person classes, a student of mine said, I'll submit my work on our learning management system. I'll just have to wait for my daughter to finish her homework because we're sharing a laptop.
Yep.
And so I don't know if I have the answer. I mean, these are things that I'm grappling with because I think of, if we're thinking about accessibility and diversity and inclusivity, who are we talking about and how are we supporting them?
Exactly. And then not only that, the digital divide is real and it still exists in rural communities and poor communities. Many of those children and even their parents may have to go to a library to get internet access or to get reliable internet access. And so when you dump all the kids in an education district onto the internet, in that community, many people are sharing the pipe, if you've got cable or, some internet like that, now I know that, there are fiber companies that are doing great things and all that, but for the most part, most of us are still sharing a pipe with everybody that we live in the neighborhood with. So, you've got random speeds, you got networks to drop, you've got all these different things that happen out there. And even to more importantly, you have hacking, people stealing people's identities, and we're always inundated with information, right? So the thing that I struggle with mostly with the people who I educate and all that is like, okay, so you get an email from someone you've never heard of again, and they say to you, hey, person A wants to talk to you, or you won $1 million or whatever it is. There is something about getting people to understand, like we always assume the best, right? So the president does want to talk to me, when he sent an email, he really does. He's interested in me. Why? Or someone says you won $1 million. Did you apply for something or did you sign up for something you can win $1 million? If you get this email in your box that says that, don't click on it. Hover over the email address and see if it turns, to somebody like you think. So the president is not going to write you from his Gmail account. He's just not, if he really wants to talk to you. Or if you won $1 million, they're not going to say, send your social security, because, I tell people this all the time, like, don't send your social security, your whatever it is, through mail. If you want that, pick up the phone and call or something like that. But you have a way to verify these people are who they are. And I think if you look at the way financial institutions do it, they're at least doing the first level of background checking and all that stuff. They don't just, so Social Security is not going to ask you for that information on they're going to ask you to, confirm your address or whatever it is. They're not going to ask you for that information using technology. So I think that in a way that the way the world is, we really have to do two parts of it. One is getting them to understand how to learn in a remote setting. But then the other side is getting them to understand what it means to learn in a remote setting. So, how often do you update your operating system? When the vendor releases an update, do you do it immediately? When there's a bug fix, do you have virus protection software? You've got all these things that are competing with the objective of just teaching. And do you think that there's a way to marry ed tech with regular tech so that you are providing support and education at the same time?
Yes, absolutely. I think there is. And also, just to add to that list, we also have to think about some of the competing demands at home for an online learner, for an adult learner, for the working class, because they might not have childcare to be provided, or they might have multiple family members living at home.
Yep.
So if they are learning, how are they going about it so that these competing demands on their end allow them to carve out time to complete an assignment, to participate in the Zoom, and to be successful when it does require some little wrinkles in their technology updates.
Absolutely. And to even do research, so how do you so if your teacher sends you a Q&A or something you need, do you just put the first thing that comes to your mind, or do you research to find out whether you're on the right track? And I think that's one of the things about learning, how we learn, so the first instinct, and a lot of us assume that we automatically know. So if I were to tell you to go to Microsoft Teams and do X, Y, and Z, that would assume that you know what Microsoft Teams is, how that piece of software works, and you know what to do with it, as opposed to going through and saying, hey, Microsoft Teams is as an application. Have you used it before? So I think that there's some assumptions made about the way we educate people, and we expect things of people. We haven't prepared them for the answer. So not only now do they have the deadline of having to get what you've assigned to them, the competing priorities at home, whether they have reliable internet, but do they know how to get the information? I think that we make a lot of assumptions about what people know and how to do things.
Right.
And I think that in education, specifically ed tech, and even regular information technology, we assume people have the same information we are. Someone once said to me, why is it that techies don't speak plain English? Because we don't know how. We have grown up in this field forever. So, when we say virus protection, or we say, a hack of phishing or spam, we assume everybody knows what that language is, and that's not
all the acronyms for the technical terms.
Right. And that's not the case, so I think that in addition to supporting, we have to also be teaching it, making sure that we're asking the right questions so that you get the right response. Because what's worse is to send somebody off in a spiral and they're stuck there, right? So go ahead.
I think also to create a safe space so that if the learner has a question, they feel comfortable asking, and that might look different from one institution to the next, but not just assuming that, well, let's keep on track, let's keep on pace, you got that right, but hey, let's carve out 10 minutes. There is no such thing as a dumb question. What could I help you with?
Yeah.
What could I help you access?
But I want to ask you something about that. So one of the things, if you go to a predominantly white institution and you are Black or brown, asking that dumb question has certain ramifications, right?
It does.
So your white colleagues want to know why you're there to begin with, right? So how did you get into my institution? What are you doing here? And then on top of all of that, if you're wrong, so I assume a lot of places still use the Socratic method for instruction. So they ask you, what time is it in England right this moment? So, we all have a good estimation of, the different time zones. So throw an answer out there, and one of the things I hear a lot about is imposter syndrome, right? So a lot of these kids who come into these institutions are the smartest, or one of the smartest in their high school, right? So they come from these great places, and then they get to this place where everybody is smart just like them, right? So everybody has the same academic wherewithal as they do, and so all of a sudden now you're going to ask me a question. I'm under pressure because they don't believe I belong here. They don't believe I'm smart, and they're questioning everything about this. So if I get this wrong, what's the capital that I have to expend to redeem myself? Or do I play it safe and don't raise my hand? Right. Like what, there's a woman wrote this book. So why are all the Black kids sitting together in the cafeteria? Because we know the struggle. We know what each other has gone through, and we know we're not going to judge each other as harshly as we're being judged by others. And so what would be your response to that? How do you think about that when you are telling people to step out there on that bridge and, risk it when there's the fear of how you're perceived, whether you belong, most people assume that when a Black or brown person comes into specifically a ranked institution, that they're on a needs-based scholarship versus a merit-based scholarship.
Right. Something that I think of it in two ways. I think of it as my own experience as a student and being one of the only brown ones in a predominantly white classroom. And then I also think of how I changed that when I became a professor myself. So let me give you my first example from as a student. Yes, it can be scary and it can be intimidating to offer your thoughts or to ask a question, but you are there for a reason and your voice has meaning, your thoughts are powerful, and you are you should feel confident to share that. And so you might start off with working in a group or participating in a discussion or taking advantage of an office hour. But the more you become comfortable with it, the easier it gets. And then others will begin to open up like you or to take those risks like you in the classroom. For the instructors, I think about what are you doing as a teacher, the head of the classroom, to make sure that the student feels comfortable with what knowledge they already bring, what lived experiences that they bring to the classroom. Are you recognizing that they have talents and interests outside of what your learning outcomes are for that day? Are you carving a space again for them to feel like they can dive in and participate and be part of the classroom culture? Or are you limiting the amount of shared space to certain students? And I had, at the community college, we often served junior and seniors in high school who were attaining college credits. And this was very intimidating for them to be in a college classroom. So I would find ways of a get to know me PowerPoint. What's something that you like and how can you explain it in this education environment?
Yeah.
And one student chose, well, I want to save money for a Tesla. Someday I want to own a Tesla.
Yeah.
Okay, let's hear it. Give us a 5-minute PowerPoint presentation on everything we need to know. You're the teacher. And students really felt empowered, and they didn't feel like, well, you have the PhD or you have the master's, I'm just here to learn from you. They took power of teaching others what is valued in their lives. And so I think that if teachers are more open to doing that, then you can, again, empower and inspire your marginalized voices in the classroom who might be constantly questioning, am I smart enough? Do I belong? Does my professor like me? Will I pass this class?
Yeah. So, I don't think I necessarily agree with that. I think all the ideas you said are really, really good ideas. But I think that when you're in a competitive environment and when you're moving beyond school, so you've graduated or you're gone, right? And so who's likely to be the person that does the hiring? Who's likely to be the person that's going to give a reference? Who's likely to be the person that's going to help? And we as Black and brown people can, we have skin in the game, and we can help. We can come to the forefront and help, but we don't have the same power structure as other groups, specifically economically, right? So we're more likely to be, we take whatever's given to us. We kind of sit back and wait, to see how this is going to turn out, and I think that for a lot of communities, specifically Black and brown communities, when you're in a very competitive environment, to make that misstep, you may not recover from it. You may not recover. Someone said to look at, the failure of a politician that's white and a politician that's Black, right? So that white politician can fail over and over again, and they get chance after chance after chance. But when that Black politician fails, it's like, okay, let us put you in this box and this is who you are. So when you're in a competitive environment where you're, going to go out and make $1 million or whatever your job is going to be when you finish school, you have to somehow or another, I want to say, like, mine, 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 your relationship and who you are, and how you're perceived, right? Because you know the answer. You can ask that dumb question. So why do I need to know what the different time zones are, or why is it I need to know this? And so you may get on the other side of that equation and say, okay, that's great. I can afford to make a mistake, but can you afford to make a mistake in a highly competitive environment where you may not get the benefit of the doubt? So in what you just described in the community college settings, I don't think that's the case. But say you're in a top 10 or top 20, 25 college, and you're Black or brown, and you don't know the answer to the question. You're sort of like standardized testing, right? So there's always been this question about why Black and brown people do so poorly on standardized questions. A lot of the way those standardized questions are asked and portrayed in these tests, give advantage to those people who have lived experiences. So they've traveled abroad, they've done more than just the basics. So how do you perceive that that's gonna change when you're in that competitive, or what you suggested would be to their advantage in that competitive environment?
I'd like to think that if there's an increase in the enrollment or in the participation or in the graduation rates of Black and Brown, then slowly we can change those standardized expectations.
Yep.
Whereas, and I think back to this is when I was working in early childhood, when we were assessing the cognitive development of preschoolers. I was in West Chicago, where there was primarily Spanish speakers, and I asked a 3-year-old to point to the castle. And I had to pause for myself. This child whose parents came from Mexico probably has never seen a castle. How am I to determine their development of language, their cognitive development, because they can't identify a castle? That's very Eurocentric.
Right.
My idea is that when it comes to higher ed, the more participation or the increase in the Black and Brown students attaining a bachelor's degree and accelerated degrees, we could then take power of this, of what the expectations are, of what knowledge is valued, what lived experiences are valued.
And that's a very good point. I think the other part is, to your point, is when you have Black and Brown instructors in the classroom as well, because it's really wonderful to see somebody who looks like you that understands the struggle, right? Because if you never struggled, how would you know what your student is going through? How would you know to look for those key indicators that something is not right?
Right.
How do you know that? So I think it's also important to have Black and Brown instructors, and maybe that was your point about getting more education. Getting the second and third degree might be the answer to that. But I mean, I think it's important to have,
absolutely,
faculty of color, there as well. I don't like faculty of color, Black and Brown faculty. Faculty of color. Okay, so let me ask you. We only have a few more minutes, so let me ask you this. So, where you are now, where do you see yourself going? What is it that you want to accomplish? What is your end goal?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I want to first and foremost be part of this movement that we're seeing in higher ed. I want to, and that is move away a bit from the brick and mortar, make education, higher education more accessible, increase accessibility to the students who are working class, who identify as Black and Brown. And then also, you reminded me of why I started in higher ed in the beginning. I want to see more Black and Brown, more females in admin levels, as a tenured faculty, as an instructor of the classroom. I was lucky enough, I went to DePaul University, so we were quite diverse. But at the community college, I had many students after class say, I never had a Latina professor. You're the first Latina professor I ever had. Someday I want to be like you. And so I think that as I move forward in ed technology, I need to remind myself to have one foot in higher ed to some degree, whether it's an adjunct position or like what we're doing right now, just to keep the conversation going, to remind myself of why I started this from the beginning.
Absolutely. And I think it's important that you serve as a voice for your community, because in the Latinx community, and I don't know how the distinction is broken between Latinx and Hispanic communities, but whatever that is, that they know that there are people out there like them that they can go to as a resource. Because I think that a lot of times we lose our interest because there's no one to go to for help. And I mean, even the simplest little thing, I just have a simple question. I just want to know X, who do I ask that? Do I ask, my white professor, male or female, or do I find someone who won't judge me so harshly for having this question, or for questioning this? And I think that when you get to these terminal degrees, I think it's even more harsh to feel comfortable asking someone that does not look like you a question that you may should understand. And there's an old philosophy that says you should know the answer to the question before you ask. But what if you really don't know? What if you really don't know? What do you do then? And where are my resources? I think that goes back to why are all the kids sitting together in the cafeteria? Because this is a person I have something in common with, and who's likely to judge me less harshly.
Very powerful.
Absolutely. So I'm I'm going to leave the remainder of the time to you. If I didn't cover something or you have something you wish to contribute, please share it now. And when the video converts, I'll send you a link. Please watch it. Let me know if I may upload it.
Yes, of course. I guess my question is, do you have any advice? Because I admire you and I respect you. What would be your advice for someone like me who has served time in the classroom as an instructor, who is now moving into ed tech? Where do you see someone like me, or what's your advice for me 5 years from now or down the line?
So if I had to answer that question, I would say you should be developed. You should have your own ed tech company. You should be thinking about what you could provide. You should be thinking about, instead of working for someone else, and this is down the line, you need to get your feet wet, but down the line, your experiences are different than others, right? So you bring a perspective to this that many may not think about, right? So,
Okay.
the digital divide, multiple people in the home, and think all the pieces, the economic structure, everything that you can think about, your experiences in that will help you develop a product that will help those communities. And if not that, to make sure that your current employer or your employer going forward considers your ideas and asks you to participate in the development of whatever they're marketing or whatever they're doing. And then I still go back and say, if I had anything to tell you that would really matter, write. And I mean, you don't have to write big giant, you could write what you just talked about today. So, when you question why these people would call you teacher, when you have this education, all that stuff, that right there would be a pretty profound paper, right? So, there's a part of that is disrespect, right? So these people are older than you are. These people have been in this game longer than you have. So there's a part of that that's respect. But there's also a part of appreciating what you bring to the game. Because, ed tech is not my area of expertise. I could talk to it, I could address it, but it's not my area of expertise. But what you bring to that experience, it's going to be different than mine. So your views, what you think, how you see your generation, the people that are in your age group, and are you a Gen X or are you another one of those?
I'm considered a millennial.
A millennial. So, the millennial experience may be different from all these other generational kind of groups, because you're younger, you've had more experience, you've been more and more places, you worked in more diverse communities, so you will bring something to the game that others may not. So I think that's one of the things that you should do is write. I think you should also think about so I think starting a business or starting a company like that would be daunting, but I also think it would be amazingly challenging and something that we need, because when you develop a product that is colorless, it tends to wash the color out of the person you're giving it to. So if I created an ed tech company and I tried to teach kids that are in different economic spectrums than I was, people who had different experiences, it would be narrow to that community. So you need to bring what you have, your age, your experiences, your ethnicity, what you have gathered over time and put in your toolbox. You need to bring that to a community that can hear it, and then figure out how to leapfrog it to other communities. Because if you're going to start a business, the idea is to make money, right? You want to, make it successful. So there's that, but you have to understand how to meet in your community first before you can go to the other community. Because if you don't meet the needs of your community, it's a good chance you won't meet the needs in other communities. And I wish companies recognize that you can't develop something just because this is the market. There are all kinds of markets out there. So when you don't get market conversion or market buy-in, it's because you've missed your community. You've missed the communities that are out there that are different from yours. So you need to have diverse people in your organization. You need to have people who can speak to all these different communities. That's why I say go into your current company and say, hey, let me work on this area because this is some of my thoughts about this, to get that experience, but also to help that company be more productive. Because I do think it takes different ideas and different views of the world to provide the best possible outcome for companies that are trying to reach these communities.
Got it. Thank you so much for that advice. I truly value it. Thank you.
Yep. And I would say, if ever you doubt yourself, stop. Whatever it is. So, if you wake up tomorrow and you decide you want to be the president of the United States, don't question why you have that thought. It's your thought. Now you have to understand what all that means, but don't doubt you ever. You know, you're a smart woman, you're young, you're very polished, you're very, you're there. So if your mind tells you, I want to do X, don't doubt it. Try it. Write it down. So your mind says, hey, I want to be the president of the United States. Write that down. When do you want to be the president of the United States? What does it take to be the president of the United States? How long will I have to do this? What are the things I have to give up to be a president? So you need to write all of that down to understand what the pros and cons of your mind's thoughts are, and then figure out, do you want to put that much energy in it? Because we fail at business and fail at life when we don't understand the expectations and the things that we need to do in order to participate at that level. So you need to understand that. And then, one of the other things I would say is, in your community, specifically in the Brown community, mentors are needed so bad. I don't like the word mentors. I don't like the word diversity either. But they need someone to see, so when you have a few minutes, boys and girls club, Girl Scouts, whatever it is, to go and tell them this is possible. Look at me. Look at what I have done.
Okay.
Because right now there, so you could Google Hispanic or Latin inventors, and you'll get, maybe 20, maybe 30. Same thing for Black. You may get a little bit more in Black because, like, so I have a company, my company, one of the things my company does, it does news and knows, right? So I did not know this, that the home security system, so, Ring and ADT and all that stuff, the first one was created by a Black woman. So you have to figure out how you define the innovation, right? So I would not automatically assume that a home security system would have been innovation, but in reality, it is. I had a little brown girl tell me, I was doing a talk for some kids. I had a little brown girl. I asked everybody in the class, so tell me a technology or innovation that you're familiar with. And this little girl, beautiful little girl, she stood up in the class and she said, spaghetti. Now I'm gonna take my mind said, okay, now this is not innovation, but the way she explained it to me was absolutely amazing. She said that without fire, you couldn't make spaghetti. Without the ability to make the dough that makes the pasta, you couldn't make spaghetti. You need a pot. And she went through this entire litany of things that she said. And I said, Meg, you're absolutely right. Absolutely, you're right. Because, if my mind was limited to, I'm thinking about, computers, laptops, smart tablets, and all those kind of things. And she really brought it back down to earth. Right. And then when she did that, another little fellow stood up and said the tire. And then I had it, the wheel, I got it. Then, I understood it. You wouldn't have thought of that. You would not have, let me say, I would not have thought of that, that spaghetti would have been an innovation, but it really is, because, it's not something you could just make just like that. You've got to understand how it's made, right? So, do you have to boil the water and get the noodles to a certain degree, make your sauce and get, it was just absolutely beautiful that she said that. And so where I was thinking about innovation, she gave me another perspective. So in your case, you will bring a different perspective to others, and, they will think, I had thought about that. So, I would always use your voice, always, support your mind. Whatever your mind comes up with, give it the benefit of the doubt. Don't dismiss it. That's absurd. President of the United States, what? Yes. Give it the benefit of the doubt. Just make sure you know what it takes to become that, and you're willing to put that into the game. So
beautiful.
My advice. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. As I said earlier, I will send you a link once it's converted. Please let me know if I may upload it, and please come back and talk. We don't even have to talk on a Zoom like this, but please come back, because I would
love that.
See you succeed. And if I can help you in any way, please, I will make sure you have my personal information. Please let me know how I can help you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
I'm so proud of you. I am just absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm in wonder. So thank you so much. This is great. Thank you. I appreciate this.
Have a good day.
You do the same. Stay safe.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.